Hello, Internet. Welcome back to the Experimental Cataclysm. If you're new here, this is the show where we talk about changes that have come to the experimental version of Cataclysm over the last 2 weeks. So, first, I wanted to talk about fire. If you've been playing the experimental version of Cataclysm, you probably noticed that fires were extinguishing basically immediately. There were a lot of issues with, some people said, there were certain ways to work around it. If you built the fire big enough, it would maintain for a period of time, but for most of us, it's not really feasible, or it is at the very minimum kind of annoying to try and coax fires into working. And so we got a fix for that 2 days ago, I think. I wasn't looking. So that has been fixed. As far as I know, that it should no longer be an issue. I actually had a chance over the weekend to play. I was going to record some and then realized that fires were broken, and I actually rely very heavily on fires. And everyone I know, there are ways around it. You can use electric stoves, you can use lanterns and stuff, but I really do like just starting a fire whenever I want to read or cook or whatever. And I know I'm not the only one, so I wanted to shout this out because it was affecting everyone who was playing. A lot of people weren't updating. As far as I know, this fixed it. So it should be safe to update now. Of course, you should back things up just in case, it's broken and you're angry and you want to go back. But yeah, it looks like fires are fixed, which is really good news because it was a very annoying bug. So, wanted to mention that. Jump into the next thing. From DCHIEH. Sorry, I have no idea how I would say that. I do recognize this name from Discord, I believe. We have bacon, pork belly, and supporting changes. So essentially, there's now pork belly in the game because previously there was no way to make bacon. Because we don't differentiate different types of meat. So, obviously if you killed a dog, wouldn't necessarily make sense to make bacon from a dog because bacon is traditionally pork. However, I don't love, so essentially what they've done, they've made it so that when you butcher a pig, or a similar pork creature, I guess we have boars and stuff, it will give you an item called pork belly, and you can use pork belly to make bacon. Now, this is actually not a great way to do this. I don't know how much people care about mod and dev type conversations, but this is a poor way of doing this. I think it would have been better to make bacon a non-pork product and just allow you to use whatever meat you wanted, because essentially bacon at this point in human development, bacon does not necessarily mean pork. They do have turkey bacon, they do have all sorts of bacon. Anything bacon has become more of a term regarding like the size and shape of the meat more than it is about actual pork belly, right? And previously, for example, I don't know, a couple hundred years ago, bacon was actually not made from the same part of the cow or the pig that bacon currently is. So, like nowadays, bacon is made from a completely different part of the pig. It used to be, it used to be the back and now it's the stomach, or it used to be the stomach and now it's the back. I don't remember. But that just, shows that over time it doesn't really mean the same thing that it used to mean. So I think it would have been better to make it so that any meat could be used for pork. And then if you were going to make pork specifically, we have a discussion pretty regularly. We discuss adding new meat types to the game. And the general agreement is that when you're going to add a specific meat type like pork versus poultry versus beef, we would do that through the inheritance system. So I don't love the way that this was implemented because I think that this is kind of a working with what you have currently rather than trying to build something. That said, this is exactly how I would have done it because I don't know how to do those other things. So although I think that this could have been executed better than adding a pork specific item that only butchers from pigs, I think there are other ways you could have done it, but this is probably how I would have done it if I were doing this because this is what I would know how to do. If that all makes sense. And like I said, I don't think most people even care for the dev side of things. But anyway, so you should be finding pork belly. And that's not to detract from, this person adding this to the game. I think it's perfectly fine. It's just, we do talk about meat types pretty frequently, about differentiating, because obviously meats all have different, caloric densities and vitamins and things. So, different types of meat in Cataclysm would make sense. It's just not something that someone has done yet, and it's generally agreed that it would be best to do it through the inheritance system rather than making actual separate meat items like this. So I don't know. I don't hate it or anything. I just, we have that conversation often enough that that's what it made me think of. So you should be getting pork belly, which you can convert into bacon. So yeah, people love bacon, right? Bacon is like the new hotness. Everybody loves bacon. I'm not a big fan of pork personally. I eat bacon maybe probably like once a year. Anyway, let's move on. Also, from that same individual, we have add fried eggs. I just wanted to shout this out because I don't eat eggs in Cataclysm, and it's mostly because their caloric density is a little bit low. When I do eat them, it's going to be deluxe scrambled eggs where I can add another ingredient to get extra calories added to the dish, because I believe eggs themselves, they have what, like 60 calories or something like that. They're pretty low. But we have fried eggs, and the benefit of fried eggs is that you would be using some sort of fat item with your, like, in the process of frying them, which should increase their caloric value slightly. I'm looking for a fat item, any butter or oil. Yeah, so it would be involving fat, which should boost those calories just a smidge when you eat them, as opposed to eating a standard boiled egg, for instance, is not going to have very many calories. So it looks like a fried egg. I mean, it'll be variable because of the ingredients that you use, but it should have more calories than simply boiling an egg or something like that. So yeah, I just wanted to shout that out for that reason. It's not like a huge change or anything. It's just we every now and then we get food items, and I try to shout out the ones that interest me, and I like the idea of having expanded. Plus, eggs, like in real life, nobody wants to eat just a boiled egg or, some plain scrambled eggs. It's pretty boring. I like a fried egg. I like a poached egg. I like, I like variety with my eggs, as it should be. Next, from Lamandis, we changed some pharmaceutical brand names to generic names. So it's complicated about trademark and copyright law and stuff in general. Like, so for instance, I'm a writer. When I write, I try really hard not to use brand names or store names, even though it's perfectly legal for me to do that and reference, say, a Walmart in a piece of writing or whatever. I try to avoid giving stores and things proper names based on real-world comparisons. And Cataclysm, for the most part, we do that. A lot of the references in the game to brands are made-up brands. They're not brands that exist in the world. And there are a few that are brand names, but for the most part, they're not. And someone went through, I'm sorry, I've already forgotten your name, Lamandis went through and changed our drug names from actual brand names to their generic explanation of what they are. And I like and I dislike this change. So, for instance, here, Xanax has been replaced with a fast-acting sedative. Prozac is renamed to an antidepressant, Thorazine is an antipsychotic, and so on and so forth. I like this because it will be a lot easier for randos who pick up the game and don't know drug names to know what these things do without having to really read their descriptions. If we can just pick up, like we've had a Treupan, for instance. I did not know what a Treupan was until I started playing Cataclysm. And if you just grab the item, you don't really know what that is. Well, who knows what a Treupan is? Nobody knows. But if we put narrow spectrum antibiotics, actually that's still something not everyone would know. But getting the word antibiotic in the title is good and will make it more recognizable at a glance, especially for newer players who are not familiar with the available medications in Cataclysm. What I don't like about this is that I guess because once I got used to it, I liked that we used actual names of medications. I don't love them being this vague. It just feels like we lost a little bit of, man, I don't know how to say it. I don't know how I feel about it exactly. I just kind of knee-jerk don't like it because it's more generic. And I did enjoy, like most people, maybe you don't know what Thorazine is, but I've been around people who have pretty significant like hallucinations and mental illness. I've experienced, I've known quite a few people with schizophrenia, and we will specifically talk about Thorazine and the impact that it has on them and how zombified they feel on that medication and whatnot. So for me, seeing actual Thorazine is like, for me, it's an instant thing. And just reducing that to antipsychotic, it just takes away some of that. I don't really know how to say what I mean. But essentially, they went through and they've changed a lot of these names to generic representations of what they are. And like I said, I think for a new player, this is actually good because it will be something that they can instantly recognize. Most people know what a stimulant is, but there are plenty of people who don't know what Adderall is. I mean, Adderall is a very common drug, but I suspect there are plenty of folks who don't know what Adderall is. And then you add into that like, so for instance, like translation or non-native English speakers, this might be called something different in a different place, right? Like I think they left aspirin alone. I believe they specifically referenced that because that's a pretty like ubiquitous name. Pretty much everyone knows what aspirin is. But I do think that some of this is stuff that people have never dealt with. Like I said, I didn't know what a Treyupan was until I played the game. So I don't know. I like and dislike this change. I'm sure some people will be very angry about this. It seems like anytime something gets renamed or changed, people have just an absolute breakdown over, like not even, I just don't understand sometimes the aggression from the community. Like this is a relatively small change that I do think is beneficial for new players, but there are so many players, I guarantee within the next like 2 weeks, I'm going to start seeing people on Discord complaining and being very aggressive about why would you change this? This is such a stupid decision, blah, 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 etc. So I don't really know how to feel about that. And I am concerned about the impact this is going to have on some people, but I think it's a fine change. I think we've talked about it enough. I don't want to ramble. I'm trying to keep these episodes shorter and less rambly, but I'm really not good at that. Next, from another simulacrum, we have an interface change that will show us the individual maximum item length and volume in pickup display. So when you go to pick up an item in Cataclysm, I always use the E key. I know some people use the G key. When that menu pops up in the upper left or whatever to show you items that are available for pickup, it will now display the individual volume and length of items that you're capable of picking up. So in this example, they're trying to pick up an emergency blanket. It's displaying that the volume of that item is going to be too much for what is available to them. They do not have enough room in their pockets currently to accommodate this emergency blanket. However, the length of the emergency blanket does fall within the maximum of what they have available. So this is just a quick and easy UI change to show you when you're trying to pick something up that's not going to fit. A lot of people have been frustrated, particularly by length. And when they have room in their pockets, here it shows 0.45. Wait, that's not right. I think this is displaying including the item that they're picking up, so that's not really an accurate thing. But here it shows, the maximum volume that you can currently accommodate with your pockets the way that they are. And then we have an example here of picking up the long stout branch, which is 5 liters and is incredibly long. I'm not sure what the actual metric for this number is. I don't know if that's like centimeters or how exactly that factors. Of course I'm an imperialist, so I use imperial measurements, which always throws things that make things a little bit more complicated. But I really like this change because it's a very quick thing that you can glance at every time you go to pick up an item, and you can clearly see why you are not able to pick something up. I think a large part of the frustration with the systems of the pockets and everything is when people try to pick up something small and relatively innocuous, they see that they have available volume and they can't pick up something easy, and they're like, I don't understand, I'm frustrated. Whereas here, especially with the color coding and whatnot, you can clearly see, okay, what I'm trying to pick up is too much volume for the volume I can currently accommodate. And same with the length. Why can't I pick up this gun? I don't understand. I have space. Well, no, you don't. Your length here is way beyond your current capacity. So it's a simple way of doing this. I really like this change. I think this is really great because it's going to alleviate a lot of frustration, especially for people. We're coming up on a 0.F release, probably. I mean, God, I don't want to estimate, but in the future, we're coming up on 0.F. There are going to be a huge number of people who are transitioning from 0.E stable to 0.F stable, which means there's going to be a lot of new people experiencing the pocket system soon. And when they do, they're going to go through the same frustrations that we've gone through over the last few months playing on experimental. They're not going to understand why they can't pick things up. They're not going to understand the new volume system and why that's conflicting with what they're trying to do. Sorry, my family is being a little noisy. It is Thanksgiving after all. And yeah, I think this is really great because it's going to help those people understand what the problem is so that they can learn to work around it. However, I do think there's still room for improvement with the pocket systems. I really think, I've been thinking about it a lot. I can't think of a good solution, but I do think we need something that, I think it was Kevin mentioned it offhandedly and it was just like kind of stuck with me, was we need a way for our stuff to kind of figure out the extra space. We need a little bit more sense in where things get auto placed in our pockets, so that we can maintain like the best available volume that we can, that sort of thing. I just don't really know how you do that practically, and I imagine that's like a huge undertaking for coding to try and work out like an algorithm or something that sorts your things in a coherent way, which sounds really complicated the more I think about it, and I don't know how feasible it really is, but I like this. They did reference somewhere, yeah, they did not put this on the advanced inventory management screen. Again, I don't know. I think, yeah, advanced inventory is going under a rework at the moment, so I imagine that's why they chose to hold off on this instead of trying to work with that. But this is a good thing, and I imagine this will make it into other menus over time, other places where you can transfer items into your inventory and whatnot. So, yeah, I just want to shout that out. It just seems like such a good change and such a practical thing to have, and I do think it's going to alleviate a lot of frustration. Next, we have some spoilers coming for new creatures. We have from Saichi here the addition of acidic zombie dogs and an acidic zombie dog brute. I'm really concerned about this creature. I think people underestimate acidic zombies, or like the whole acidic line of zombies. They actually are incredibly powerful. I mean, obviously, like corrosives are game-endingly bad sometimes, depending on where you are. But spitters, acidic zombies, all of the variants can really be very dangerous pretty much all the time. Like, you know, if you, I mean, we're not going to rehash everything, but like acidic zombies are very powerful. It's a very powerful ability. The acid barf in particular is one of the most devastating abilities because it not only damages your person, it also creates a pool of acid at your feet and deals damage over time. So there's pretty significant stuff going on with the acid barf. And then you add that to the speed of a dog and it becomes quite dangerous. So this creature, although it has very low HP, its speed is not crazy high, but it is still fast. And the acid barf is on a 10 round cooldown. 10 is fine. That's like a reasonable cooldown for this. I'm just concerned about how dangerous this might be because of being faster than your standard acid zombie or something that you could easily avoid. Especially as they're newly added, it may be a while before they get their own tile, so people may not even recognize the danger of this creature right away. Other than that, it's a pretty basic creature. It does get bonus damage to its bite attack, or I'm sorry, to its melee attack because of having acid like in its face. And then I imagine that extends to the bite ability as well. I'm not sure if melee bonuses like this apply to special attacks or not. It's mainly the acid barf that you need to be aware of and concerned about. And then, of course, they have the, is it the acid death function? I believe when it dies, it creates a pool of acid on the ground. That's what this function is. And then the flag of acid blood is what makes it difficult to smash without damaging yourself. I think is how that works. It's been a while since I looked at these. And then they added a zombie brute as well. From what I can tell, it's basically just an upgraded version of the zombie dog. It does not seem to have a smash attack the way most brutes do. However, it has an acid splash thing, which when you hit this dog in melee, it will splash acid at you, which is concerning. And then it will also inherit the things like the acid blood and whatnot from the base creature. But for the most part, it's just a beefed up version of the first one. Looks like we have a typo here, which is probably not great. That probably renders that probably doesn't work then, but weight is such a, it doesn't matter. Anyway, so acid dogs, I'm a little concerned about them, frankly. We will see how dangerous they are, particularly the upgraded one. It's going to be able to close ground pretty quickly, and then, of course, has the acid barf ability. Be very wary. Like, if you're a new player and you have not played very much, maybe you haven't seen the acidic line of zombies, spitters are probably the least dangerous because of the inaccuracy of their damage, but the acid barf attack, as far as I know, hits you 100% of the time, because it will always create a tile of acid beneath you, and there's no way for you to avoid that damage, because as soon as you move or do anything, you will begin taking acid damage from standing in the acid. So acid barf pretty much is a guarantee hurt to you, plus it can deal corrosive damage over time. It's just a very dangerous ability. So just be careful. Careful out there, kids. Acid dogs. What are you going to do? Let's move on. Let's move on, I said. Okay. Next from Night Prianic. In fact, we had multiple PRs from Night this week. Or the last 2 weeks. We're going to talk about some of them, but we're going to kind of broad stroke it. First, we have 2 looted and boarded up variants for the grocery stores. This, we continue, we talked about last week the liquor stores, and how they were added a boarded up variant as well as a kind of vandalized variant. And I like this. I like the idea that certain locations might be completely lacking in gear and whatnot. I do think that it is only okay if they have a very low chance to spawn. Looted variants. Looted variants are the most common. Boarded variants are twice as rare, and intact variants have only a 10% chance to spawn. I actually dislike that a lot. Looted variants have 5%. So what I'm hearing is that looted variants are the most common. So most of the time when you go to a grocery store, it will be looted. I hope that's not correct. I know that people kind of want the game to have less loot than it does, but I'm concerned that the more they work on these things, the less common they're going to become. I wish you had commented these. I don't know which ones are which. Maybe I'm just misunderstanding. I'm really hoping that looted ones are not the most common. Because, people always talk about reducing loot spawns in locations, but I think with the lore of Cataclysm, it's actually not that long after the shit kind of hits the fan, so to speak. So I don't think there was a lot of time for people to do looting and whatnot. It seemed like a very abrupt apocalypse. So I never really liked the idea of locations being super vandalized or looted, and I just don't really want the majority of the locations I go to excuse me, I don't want the majority of locations I go to be already looted. That just doesn't strike me as appropriate with the lore. That said, Night is a core developer, so they probably know better than I do, but I really don't like the idea of these being the majority. I'm hoping I'm misunderstanding this, but we'll see. I do like the idea of looted locations. I just don't want them to be the dominant location, if that makes any sense. And then also from Night, we got a series of PRs that make the streets of Cataclysm a little bit more appealing. And we're looking at this one. There should be links to all of them in the description down below, but we're looking at this one because it shows a screenshot of all 3 changes. So we had basically added lampposts, and these are evenly spaced along sidewalks. Like if we continue looking here, we would see more as we proceeded down the sidewalk, kind of like you would in real life, evenly spaced along the road here. And then additionally, we added traffic lights, Night added traffic lights, which we can see here, just at the intersection. And then also there's a stop line as well for traffic. And I actually don't like the stop line. I feel like they should have their own tiles instead of using the same like dashes here. But that's obviously something that doesn't really matter at all. That's just purely an aesthetic thing. So I really like this. I think these things make the world seem a lot kind of weird that they tripled up the stoplights. The other pictures I've seen, they're very evenly spaced. They look very natural and very good. This is a bit odd to see them clustered like that. Same here, very clustered. I don't know why that's happening. Although all the other images I saw and in game when I saw them, they looked really good. And so I don't take this as the representation of the majority. I do think they largely look very good and add something to the world. And I really like these changes. They're very simple changes that really, are not like they're gonna have virtually no impact whatsoever on gameplay. But I love things that flesh out the world, and it really does make the roads look a lot less bland when you have this extra stuff going on the sidewalks and the traffic lights and the dotted lines at intersections. I really like this. I think this is a really cool, relatively simple thing that I would have never thought of, but I actually like. It's one of those things you don't realize how much you wanted it until you see it, and you're like, okay, things look a lot nicer now. So I really like that change. Hopefully, everyone else. We don't have stop signs yet. But yeah, hopefully everyone likes it. Definitely take a look at it in game. I do think it looks better than some of the screenshots are showing. I think this is a really cool change. So yeah, those were the three that I noticed: was stop lights, lamp posts, and then the stop lines themselves. So I don't know if there were more than that and I just missed them, but I really like this. So let's move on. Next, we have from James McConroy, we have Ferris zombies that have been added to the game. Ferris, I believe, does that mean magnetic? No, Ferris is just iron, I believe, is what Ferris means. So we have a slew of new zombies, and we're not going to go over all of them because there's several of them, but I do want to draw your attention to one thing. So there are going to be rusty zombies in the game. I really like the idea of them. Like, I think the rust zombie is literally just a zombie that basically has been rolling around in debris and has a bunch of metal all over them. So we find the rust zombie, a zombie impaled with a multitude of metal fragments that are covered in a thick layer of rust that seem to propagate to other parts of the body, I assume is what that says. So there are a variety of those type of creatures, and they do evolve into each other. So like, this is not just adding, like 6 new zombies. They are evolutions of one another. The main thing that I really want to talk about that is concerning to me, like, we're not going to go over all their stats, there's too many of them. What concerns me is this right here, this attack effect of tetanus. So this is the basic rust zombie. As far as I could see, it looks like this will be spawning very early in the game. So it is something that you're going to see pretty early on. However, it has this ability to give you tetanus. And I had to ask some questions on the dev server because I didn't really understand what this meant. We do have tetanus in the game. It's been in the game for a long time. But the only way you really got it was, I believe, if you were walking barefoot over metal wreckage. So like if you were at a like the downed helicopter or something where there's those big metal piles that you can dig out. If you walked over those barefoot, I believe you had a chance of getting tetanus. As far as I know, that's like the only way previously that you could get tetanus. So most people don't even know that tetanus exists in the game. Most people wouldn't know, like, wouldn't be able to recognize the symptoms and whatnot. And here we have a creature that, as far as I can tell, this just has a flat out 10% chance every time it attacks you to give you tetanus. 10% on every single attack is way too high. Okay. You figure this thing, okay, melee skill of 4. And where's its speed? Speed of 65. So it's probably attacking you every 2 turns. And then every attack that it lands on you has a 10% chance of causing tetanus. That's really high. And I believe it also applies to special attacks, I think. So, if it scratched you or it bit you, it would also give a chance of giving you tetanus. Now, I like the idea of a creature that is covered in metal shards that are rusted. The possibility of that giving you tetanus seems like a great idea. I don't like the high percentage chance. And then someone on Discord pointed out that it doesn't specify a duration for the tetanus, so this might not even work. But I'm really not familiar with attack Fs. I don't think I've ever used that. I believe last time I added an effect to a zombie for a special attack was like 2 years ago. So I don't know if this is new. This might be related to Korg, making it so you can attach certain things. Or maybe this is an old system I'm just not familiar with. But as far as I can tell, if it was working as intended, it would give you a 10% chance every attack. It gets worse because the higher upgraded ones actually double that. They give you a 20% chance on every single hit to give you tetanus, and someone said like, oh, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's a 1 in 20 chance. But based on what I could see, it's a flat percentage. So it looks like it's a 20% chance every time it hits you to give you tetanus, and that's just too damn high. I don't really know who, looked this over or whatever, but that's entirely too high, especially once you get into the higher tier. So like, naturally you think like, okay, well, this is a higher tier zombie that gets upgraded to, so of course we can raise up the percentages, we can make everything a little bit more difficult. Problem is, you're also actually you didn't raise its speed, but you're raising all these other things, so not only does it, get the regular melee attack, well, this one has the bite and scratch, same as the last one, but it gets an additional attack, so it's attacking even more frequently, and it's a higher percentage chance per hit. It's just too high. Frankly, that should be reduced to like, I don't know, off the top of my head, if I were doing it, probably like 3% would be my suggestion. Frankly, but I don't know super well the effects and whatnot. Partly tetanus is hard coded, part of it is in JSON, so I'm not sure how that all interacts. I did ask around on the dev server. I didn't get a ton of really clear answers, but it generally seems to me like these are just way too high of a percentage. So I would be very, very wary of the Ferris zombies, which, by the way, are rust zombies, rust-plated zombies, urchin zombies, hammer hands, which is, where do I know the word hammer hands from? A brute with wrecking balls for hands. Was that that's in a Harry Dresden novel, Hammer Hands. It was like a horror movie villain that had sledgehammers attached to the stumps of his wrists or something like that. Okay, nobody cares about that. But anyway, and a shelled zombie. So these rust zombies are going to be making an appearance in the game, and they do seem like they're OP at the moment if they're working as intended. So just be very careful. I would not engage them in melee really ever until these percentages get nerfed. And then, just really don't want to get tetanus. Seems like a horrible thing to get in the apocalypse. And, of course, if you do get tetanus, apparently antibiotics will take care of that, which makes perfect sense. So just something to be aware of. I'm concerned about these creatures. I think that they need to be reviewed and edited. The thing, too, is that this was initially suggested on May 16th. I remembered this from a long time ago, and it was not merged until about 10 days ago. And there were multiple periods of time in here where it went stale, and no one was working on it. Now, it is listed as a work in progress, which usually means people are going to work on it when they have time and they're able to, so it'll be over a longer stretch of time. But you got to understand, from May till now is a pretty significant amount of time, so you never know. Maybe they were intending to change some of this stuff and then forgot about it, or any number of things. But I really am very concerned about these high percentage chances. So just keep that in mind, especially if you come across the zombie urchin. I would highly recommend you just completely stay away from them. Tetanus in the game, by the way, is not actually that big of a deal. It gives a pretty significant dexterity debuff, if I remember right, and that's really the only thing that it does. It's not that concerning. If the certain circumstances line up, I do believe it can knock you to the ground and you can kind of spasm and stuff, but for the most part it's just going to be like a minor debuff. But it's just too high of a percentage, and it really needs to be fixed, especially because antibiotics aren't the most common thing in the game. So in the early game, you come across a rust zombie, that could be pretty concerning. And that's really all I have to say about that. Again, trying to keep these short. I ramble way too much. We're already at 35 minutes before my edits. So everybody, I think that's going to be a wrap for this week's episode. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully everything made sense and I wasn't just a rambly idiot. It is the holidays, which tends to make things more difficult. I worked about 14 hours yesterday, which is super fun, and my brain has not quite recovered yet. Everybody, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you're having a good holiday season. Stay safe out there, and I will be back in a couple weeks with another episode, and I'll see you next time.